Let's get to the race for the White House now. And the fight to defeat ISIS seems to be pushing Hillary Clinton somewhat to the right, as she apparently works to distance herself from President Obama on issues of terrorism and national security. The former Secretary of State saying that ISIS cannot be contained, that the U.S. should aggressively go after the terrorists. She is now calling for no-fly zones over some parts of Syria and suggesting that more ground forces might be necessary. Joining us now, Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review and a Fox News contributor, and Robert Costa, national political reporter at The Washington Post. Robert, this is a difficult line that Hillary Clinton has to walk because she cannot be seen in direct opposition of too many of Barack Obama's policies. He was her boss, after all. But she has to try to make a name for herself at a time when Americans are very uncomfortable with the growth of ISIS and the prospects of terrorism.
In many respects, it's a natural turn for Secretary Clinton. She's long been a more hawkish voice in the Democratic Party. She's also at the later stage, even though the voting hasn't happened, of this Democratic primary. Senator Sanders has not become a major threat to her candidacy. So we see Secretary Clinton looking more toward a general election and making the kind of argument she would make in that situation.
What about the moves that she is making, suggesting, Jonah, that you might need to put troops on the ground, more troops on the ground in Syria, for instance?
Yeah, I think Bob is right, that she is essentially tacking as far as she can to the right in order to start preparing for the general campaign. But the problem, I think, in part is all of this is very small ball when it comes to Hillary's larger reputation. People know who she is. She was the much ballyhooed star of his foreign policy team, Barack Obama's foreign policy team, for his first 4 years. She owns Barack Obama's foreign policy. She owns this legacy, and the idea that somehow tacking in a Clintonian way, a little more right, a little more hawkish, so she's the most hawkish one in a sort of rump field of Democrats, which is sort of like the tallest mountain in Kansas. I don't think it compensates for her larger problems as being the inheritor of the Obama legacy on foreign policy.
Here is part of a speech she made in the last week, and in which she talks about the possible need for more troops in the Middle East. Listen.
Like President Obama, I do not believe that we should again have 100,000 American troops in combat in the Middle East. That is just not the smart move to make here. If we've learned anything from 15 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's that local people and nations have to secure their own communities. We can help them, and we should, but we cannot substitute for them.
So has she, in a comment like that, Robert, has she alienated any of the hardcore Democrats who might not want to see more boots on the ground?
She may well have. I was just in Iowa, and when I spoke to some Democratic voters there, you get the sense that they still look back to her vote for the Iraq War more than a decade ago. They're uncomfortable with some of her statements on the current conflict in Syria and with ISIS. But there's not an advocate for that more dovish position. Sanders is not countering Clinton in a significant way that's changing the tide of the primary.
All right, let's turn our attention to the GOP race for the White House now. And a brand new poll out of Iowa showing Donald Trump still leading at 25%. Senator Ted Cruz, though, might be the real surprise this time. He's doubled his support in just 4 weeks. He's now at 23%, which is within the margin of error for the top spot. Dr. Ben Carson drops to third. Senator Marco Rubio surges to fourth. Senator Rand Paul is next, with Governor Jeb Bush seeming to still lose some ground, dropping a percentage point from a month ago. Jonah, you say these numbers are not a real surprise to you. Why?
Well, in part because we saw that Ben Carson was sliding, and that and it makes sense that a lot of those people would go to Ted Cruz. In part because Ted Cruz is a pretty good standard bearer, particularly in Iowa, for the conservative vote. Most of the votes going to Donald Trump are liberal, self-described liberals and moderates, and also Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio have had the best strategic patience of anybody on the Republican side of the field. They understand the timing of these things, the pacing of these things, and they want to have their kick like in a marathon when it matters, as you come up on the first votes. And that's what's happening now. Cruz has been almost brilliant in his way of cultivating the right-wing base, of not alienating Donald Trump, and of stealing voters from people like Rand Paul and now Ben Carson.
I suppose, Robert, if Ted Cruz is now within spitting distance of Donald Trump, we can expect to hear a lot of negative comments about Ted Cruz out of the mouth of Donald Trump in the days ahead.
So far, we've seen very little confrontation between these two candidates. They're almost like two boxers at opposite sides of the ring, eyeing each other, knowing a fight is on the horizon, but each is reluctant to throw that first blow. We have seen Senator Cruz start to talk on the campaign trail about the need for a softer tone in the Republican Party, and that phrase, in many ways, was a veiled commentary on Trump, but no direct confrontation at the moment.
Do you expect, Jonah, that Donald Trump will remain up there where he is, sort of almost stratospheric numbers, 25% right now? Or if candidates start to drop out of the race, are they going to go other places?
Yeah, my suspicion is that at least some polls are going to start showing Ted Cruz as the front runner in Iowa. It happened for Ben Carson. Most of the Iowa Republican electorate is not supporting Donald Trump. And we know from Donald Trump's past is anytime he is threatened or is seen as not the #1 guy, not the alpha dog, not the winner, he kind of loses his cool and goes on the attack. And it'll be very interesting to see him attack Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz is the kind of guy who swims across a moat with a knife in his teeth, and he knows how to fight back.
The imagery is so just interesting to listen to and think about. Jonah Goldberg, Robert Costa, thank you both.
Thank you.
It does leave you with a lasting image.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Well, ask Ted Cruz about that
Maybe
perhaps
some
the next
camouflage
time he's
heat.
on.
Yeah.
Does he do this?